views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. It is the program on BronxNet television where we talk to journalists and editors, in some cases publishers, and give you and photographers and videographers, give you an idea as to what they're thinking about, what they're saying, so that way when you read or see what they do, you have a little more insight into it. And this evening, I am just thrilled beyond belief because my longtime friend, colleague, he is on BronxNet's board, let's be fair about that, but I've known John Collazzi for a long time, and he revealed to me, drum roll, this is, after all his years of association in Bronx media with BronxNet, this is the first time he's on this side of the camera. Hi, John.
How are you?
Good, nice to have you with
Gary.
us. I mentioned to you briefly that so many elected officials and others say, I got my first time on television with you. Now we can add you to that list.
Good. Happy to be part of that group.
So we're going to talk about this, which I just love. And as somebody who works in the Bronx and is interested in the Bronx, this is really a publication you're going to need to know about called Bronx Stats. We're going to talk about that. But little history. So you were actually the founder of the Bronx Times Report.
I was a co-founder.
Co-founder.
Yes.
A little background for people who don't know.
1981, Michael Benedetto, who's an assemblyman today in the Northeast Bronx. The two of us started the paper after several failed political campaigns. And we did an apolitical newspaper. We left the politics out. We just covered the Bronx in a very positive light. And over the years, it just resonated with the people, leaders, and took off.
I'm guessing when I ask you this question, the answer is going to be the same answer that you would give me today. What was the value of it? Why start it? Why did we need a publication like the Bronx Times, specifically in 81? But if you look at 81, I got to do the math. It's what, 37
years ago? Yeah, 37.
37
Time has flown. I was only 29 years old at the time.
So what was the idea? Well, okay, so you'd done some politics, but what was the idea?
Well, we had two publications that were predominant in the Bronx at the time. The Bronx Press Review, which was everybody knew that paper. People grew up on that newspaper, but the community had changed a lot over the years. The paper started in the late 30s to serve the Park District community. It tried to pretty much report to this, it was attracted to the same readership. It never really moved out of its circle of.
It was limited.
It was limited in its scope and limited in its interest areas of focus. Mm-hmm. And so we knew it was time to take a look at that product as maybe we might have an opportunity to make some inroads against it. Mm-hmm. The other publication was the Bronx News.
Right.
Which was a very
Co-op City.
Hagedorn publication.
Hagedorn, right.
Which was a very political newspaper. It was involved in every political race. It was not what we felt was a newspaper should be. A community newspaper should be there to promote the Bronx, and it should not be in anybody's pocket as far as Republican or Democrat. And they were kind of supporting the status quo.
Mm-hmm. And so now I'm going to bring it up to date. So it's really the same thing, that you want positive news. We want a look at the Bronx, and frankly, the Bronx Times has expanded. Really, the coverage now is the whole Bronx, mm-hmm. Which you've always done it a little bit, but now you really are. And I'm guessing the reasoning is the same. We need positive news coverage. Now that there's fewer papers, the Bronx Times still has a very important role.
Well, the newspaper has a role to promote the Bronx in the best light, and as the opportunity in the South Bronx, especially the West Bronx, as things improved, we wanted to be part of that that story, the narrative. We bring that narrative to the reader.
One of the things you and I were doing just beforehand was reminiscing about some of the reporters that we know. It must be very gratifying. You used the name Daniel Beekman when we were just speaking. It must be very gratifying when reporters, even though you hate to see them move on because they're good reporters, but when they start at a quote unquote local paper and then get bigger, there must be some joy in that.
Yeah, there is. It's a mixed. It's a mixed. It's a mixed joy. Bittersweet, because you work 1 to 2 years working on all the corrections and all the getting them molded to be astute and to do the in-depth coverage. And finally, when they get to that point that you say, "Well, I have a genuine reporter here."
Goodbye. I'm going to the Daily News.
They're on the move. Yeah, and that's what we're always happy to see them move.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to see anybody stay. We just want everybody to make sure they don't leave us before they've got the tools to succeed.
And they're ready to go. Is there, aside from the few times that I was actually on the cover of the paper, is there anything memorable for you that you say, this was something we did that aside from Bronx Stats, don't worry, we're getting to it, that was real important, or that was a landmark thing that you
I tell you, the story that I always think of is a story that we didn't cover.
Oh, here we go.
So it's always been, I laugh at it, and I was covering this this new operation called Freedom Industries back in the 80s. They had just moved to Bronxdale Avenue, the old Christides warehouse. And I wanted to do, his name was Mr. Henry, I remember his name was Henry. And I was called by somebody, I said, give this guy a call. He's got an interesting story to tell. He does the ready-to-eat meals for the military. He's a minority contractor. He's got this big operation, he's got these big contracts, and he's willing to do the story. So I go there. It's a gigantic facility. You're on a train, a cart inside, actually a tram within the facility to get from point to point. That's how large the warehouse was. And we did a story. It was a very interesting story. And I'm sitting in his office at the end, he gathered the last details I need. He says to me, "But this isn't the story. This is not the story." I said, "What are you talking about, Mr. Dan? What's the story?" He goes, "I used to be on River Avenue, and I got kicked out by the politicians."
Oh.
So I said, "What do you mean you got kicked out by the politicians?" He said, "There's this company called WedTech.
Oh my goodness!
I tell you, it's a bunch of politicians. They're all taking money. He starts going through the whole thing, and I said, "Mr. Henry, that story's not for me. That story's not for me."
Right.
3 weeks later, that story broke in the news.
Of course,
it was
for
the biggest
people who
story.
don't know, it was one of the biggest scandals in Bronx history.
Took down some mighty powerful people. But I said to him, I remember saying, "That story's not for me."
So why I'm enthusiastic about Bronx Stats, this really, all the community board, I'm just going through it, we're going to read it together. The community boards, all your elected officials are there, all the police precincts are there, parks and playground facilities, things of famed Bronx sculptures. What does it take to put this together? Now, I assume some of the material you have from year to year, but it's got to be updated.
It's updated. It's updated on a rotational basis. Every 2-3 years, we do several sections over again to refresh them and to remove whatever has changed in the meantime. So it could be some. And
I guess the same question that I asked when we talked about why you started the Bronx Times. What was the idea about how many years you've been doing this?
Quite a few, like 12 to 15 years.
And what's the philosophy behind it? It's an incredibly valuable piece.
It's
for anybody.
It's an almanac. It's an almanac, and I feel that it's great to have I use it all the time myself. I need information, a telephone number, a name of a person. I want to get the correct spelling of it, a street name, a park. I can use this resource.
I'll give you an example. So somebody will say, "Gee, in my neighborhood is a building, and they're talking about tearing it down, or we're thinking of proposing." You can find out where the landmarks in the Bronx are, so you can find out, that kind of thing. Or, "Gee whiz, this is a historic place in the Bronx. We'd like to have it landmarked. Is it landmarked?" Now, you can search the web and try and figure it out. It's all right here.
And there's several different designations there. It's not just one designation. It's city, state, and federal.
Major landmarks, golf courses, influential people, the Walk of Fame. It was interesting. I recently was looking up KRS-One to find out when he was inducted into the Bronx Walk of Fame.
Great. Yeah.
And you know what else? Who just died is Neil Simon.
Yes.
And he was never inducted.
Never on the Walk of
I
Fame.
looked. It's funny. I looked it up.
Yeah.
I said, "Gee, was he in there?" But he never was. I guess they.
When our reporter did the story 2 weeks ago, I said, find out why. I think it's strange that he's from Manhattan. It was like, I mean, I could see the California. You have to.
But he went to
you have
Duke
to
Clinton
fly
High
them in.
School.
You have to, give them room and board. But he's from Manhattan. It's not that hard to. But their schedule never worked out.
Never worked out.
We spoke to the borough president Callion, and he said that they had tried for years to.
Just as an aside, I wonder if now even posthumously
They could do it. They did Zorro.
For
Guy Williams, they did that way.
Tell me about putting it together. You have to have a lot of people, or is it just one or two people assigned to do it? I mean, I would think you'd need a lot of people.
What we do is we have a receptionist that's Flash. She does little chores, little jobs behind the scenes.
And she's not
She
picking up
makes
the phone?
phone calls to make sure that information has not changed as far as directors and addresses, and she makes those phone calls throughout the year to see we make sure that information is kept up to date. And then Laura Gary is the publisher, and we look at the publication and say, oh, this is where major revisions have to be done, or we want to add something. Like next year, we're adding a whole new item.
He's not going to say what it is. I'm not going to push him. It's fine. Here's the other thing, which I'm going to add to that. If the information is wrong, it's worthless, right? There's
Yes.
no point in saying, here's the phone number or the district manager of your now, things will change, there's no doubt. But if you have like a guy who left 5 years ago and he's still listed
there,
here,
it's not good.
then it's not.
No.
So where can people get it? How do people get it?
They can call the Bronx Times.
You can call the Bronx Times, and the phone number is?
718-260-4592.
Okay. 260.
And you can order bundles of this if you have an organization that you wish to give it out to, distribute it to. There's plenty of opportunity to get multiple copies.
Day to day, week to week, the plans for the future just the same. Keep putting it out.
Keep
right?
putting it out and try and improve the circulation, improve the reach and the penetration into the new communities. I know right now we have around 30, 40 new locations. We're about to firm up to.
Well, listen, I have said it. People who watch this program and watch BronxNet knows I have said it. The paper is, and I know you have many good years, but right now the paper is as good as it's ever been. You're covering a wide range of stories, which I always need to know what's going on, and so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
37 years. I'm trying to count all those.
Who ever thought?
John Collazzi, I guess technically the editor, co-founder of the Bronx Times.
Still have my name on the masthead.
Stats.
In the staff box, my name is still there as a co-founder,
right, there it
along
is.
with Mr. Benedetto's. And
So I guess you wake up in the morning, if you see your name there, you know things are still going well.
Yeah.
John, just
Thank you
so
very
great
much,
to have
Gary.
you.
Thank you.
First time on BronxNet television after all these years. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be back. Then we're going to go back to what we normally do. We're going to talk about the upcoming primaries. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and as I promised, we're going to be talking about the primaries. I do want to thank John Collazzi for coming on the show. It was really a joy to have him. I've known him for many years, and it was the first time he's ever been on. He's on the BronxNet's board. It was the first time he's ever been on TV, so it was really fun. But anyway, right now it's also fun when we get to talk to Jarret Murphy, who is the editor at City Limits. Nice to have you with us again, Jarret. What's up?
Pleasure to be here.
Always good.
Primary day, getting excited.
It's a very interesting primary because some years it's like, well, okay, great, there's going to be primary. But here, listen, you want to start with the governor's race? My sense is Governor Cuomo will come out ahead, but not without some thorns, not without some
I think
sticking
you're right.
points.
I think that's where the smart money is. I mean, the polling, you can't rely on that totally. It's been wrong in some of the races in other jurisdictions this, blue wave year. But the governor has the advantage of incumbency, a huge campaign war chest, although he's spending through that. But yeah, I think that the race has been interesting. He's clearly had to move left. He's clearly recognized that there is a threat. I don't know if he has ambitions beyond the office he holds now. It'll be interesting to see if he does hold them, how the results next week shape those. Obviously, it's up to the voters, and they could do everything from send him a strong message to give him a ringing endorsement to actually throw him out of office. And I really think that Nixon's campaign released a memo yesterday, kind of laying out the rationale for how they can still win this thing. And, part of that is to make sure that the narrative doesn't start becoming that it's a fait accompli. I don't know how realistic their assessment is, but there is a path, and there have been upsets in the past this year, so who knows? But it should make for an interesting night, and that race obviously sets up the rest of the evening.
And she embodies in some ways this movement that really is nationwide. You can just open up any newspaper in the nation and find that the Democrats are fighting kind of for the soul of the party. Is it people to the far left? I hate using the word socialism because it distorts the reality of what some of the platforms actually are. And she kind of embodies that. I'm going to offer this to you, and then maybe, BronxNet is going to be having coverage that on primary night. Maybe we'll have that conversation again, depending on what goes on. I believe she has not been consistent. And, I saw a story in the Daily News today that they say, well, she's a big friend of de Blasio, but she doesn't really support him on NYCHA. Well, it's like, you can't have it both ways. Who are your associates? What do you stand for? You know what I mean? And so I feel like her inconsistency has hurt her. Am I tapping into something reasonable here?
It's interesting. I think that, first of all, one thing about the blue wave that we saw in the results this week in Massachusetts, where Michael Papalano was thrown out by Ms. Presley, is that it's not only ideological. You know, there was very little ideological separation between them. There's very little ideological separation in some of the state Senate races we're looking at where former IDC members are up. A lot of it really is just about new faces and changing the gender and racial complexity, or complexion, I should say, of people who are presenting us. But yeah, I think that it's possible there were inconsistencies there by Nixon that tripped her up. I think that the bigger problem is that, and this probably goes to the fact that she's not been on the air and had less money, you know, critiquing Cuomo on the issues that matter to us downstate is effective to a point. But it's a vast state, is New York, and being able to talk about the issues that matter in Schenectady and Syracuse and Buffalo, and being able to present an alternative vision is where she has struggled, at least in getting the message out. She has such a vision. I think she articulated it at the debate, talking about criminal justice reform, talking about health care. But unfortunately, because of her need to chase free media, which is people like you and I, and not get on paid media, it's been harder for her to talk about that message as opposed to just being a referendum on Cuomo.
We could talk for a long time about this, but and also, of course, there are a couple of Bronx races that are fascinating. But let's get into this Attorney General's race. This is also incredibly significant, especially with national implications, given the potential role that New York legal process is going to potentially have, even, you know, going down to the White House. How do you read that race, and do you have a favorite? I mean, to me, it's pretty well split, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been so little polling on any of these races. You know, the state Senate races are basically flying completely blind. The statewide races, there's been a little polling about a month ago, but really not very much. And the polling was not too revealing because it revealed that basically the majority was undecided. It's a fascinating race. The Attorney General's, it's one we weren't supposed to get because obviously Eric Schneiderman was expected to cruise to a third term. That didn't happen. And it's a field on the Democratic side of four, you know, pretty impressive people, very different resumes, slightly different conceptions of the job. But you're right, it's an important role potentially in country in terms of the, you know, legal challenges to the Trump administration. I think that Zephyr Teachout has the momentum. I think that, you know, that was indicated in the last debate where people weren't going after her. We'll see how tonight's, there's a forum somewhere tonight that they'll be appearing at, how that goes. I think she has the momentum. I think Letitia James is her closest competitor. But it really does come down to turnout. And remember, we're in the city here. We're in a bit of a bubble. It's a big state. And voters elsewhere could be responding to very different stimuli than we are.
You know, it's funny you say that because I was just thinking that Letitia James, you know, has the name recognition, but she doesn't necessarily have that name recognition in Buffalo and Syracuse and, you know, and Albany and points north. So to me, it's a fascinating thing. I want to ask you, and I don't know if you have a feel for it. I don't, so I'm going to admit that straight up. Democrats across the state are talking about eventually, or hopefully from their point of view, taking over majority in the state Senate. Do you have a sense if any of you know, the hopefuls will come through to overturn at least one seat to make that happen?
Well, it's fascinating. I don't know, and I think it's early to say. And I think, frankly, events in Washington and elsewhere, and also what the Democratic ticket looks like after Thursday, may shape those prospects quite a bit. I mean, it makes a complicated question whether or not, in terms of winning the state Senate, if for Democrats having Andrew Cuomo or Cynthia Nixon at the top of their ticket is a better case. I don't know how to break that down, but I think it might have some effect. I do know that the first and most interesting contest kind of toward deciding that question will actually occur on primary day, when in Brooklyn, Blake Morris is challenging Simcha Felder. Felder is that 32nd vote. He is a Democrat who has always caucused with Republicans in the Senate. It is because of him that the Senate is split 32-31 Republican. If Morris were to win, which I think is unlikely, that would, at least on paper, make the Senate in January already Democratic by just one vote. Democrats are hoping to get more than that, so it is not a precarious majority, you know, maybe a 3 or 4 seat majority, but I think there are a lot of variables in that, only some of which will be decided on the 13th.
I'm going to make a statement here that larger than any of those individual races. It's my own perception, and it comes out of the 2016 presidential election. And I think it filters down to all these local races, and it's the answer to the Nixon-Cuomo question and to the New York State Senate question, and that is that the National Democratic Party has not defined what its priorities are out loud, so that voters who say they want to vote blue are still wrestling with, well, who really is the Democrat? Is it a centrist Democrat? Is it a Democrat that leans more left? And I think that guidance hurts the Democrats on a national scale and also has not helped Democrats solve some of these other issues on local levels. That's Gary's philosophy.
I think you've tapped into something there, and I think I've talked with friends about this, and the question of whether the Democrats are going for trying to win a 51-49 election nationally, or try to get a 55-45 country where there's more consensus. And it really comes down to whether or not you think that merely not being Donald Trump and being the opposition to him, if that's enough to win, whether you're talking about a state Senate seat, a gubernatorial election, or a national race in a few years, or whether you need to present something else, and whether that something else is on the social issues like abortion and gun rights that have dominated a lot of the national conversation of recent years, or whether there is a compelling economic agenda, something to appeal to those, perhaps imaginary but likely quite real Trump voters. Those working class people, mostly white folks, who think that they have been betrayed by the economy as much as their government. And whether you're going to make an attempt to reach out to and organize people in that sector who are not racists or bigots, and who simply are looking for something to hope.
Jarret, it comes down to, and I believe this from the first day Trump was elected, that Democrats nationally have allowed the Republicans to handle the national dialogue. They have commandeered the national dialogue, and Democrats have either not tried or not been able to get in there and say, well, this is why, Roe v. Wade is important, or this is why Obamacare should not be thrown out. They just allow the negativity to go and hope that, the media reports it. Anyway, Jarret, we got to run. We were talking a moment ago, maybe we can catch you on primary night and discuss some of these things and maybe have some answers to some of these questions.
I'll look for them, Gary. I'll try.
All right. Jarret Murphy, editor of City Limits, thank you so much, and we'll see you around
Thank you.
town. Great.
Take care, Gary.
Always
Thanks.
great to have him. And, one of the things that BronxNet has done incredibly well, I know I've been part of that effort, and that is to give voters some information. We try to provide our debates, which we do, and we, of course, work very hard on in the district so you can see individual candidates. Voter literacy is just so important and so underappreciated, and certainly congratulations to BronxNet and Michael Max and Marissa and all the people who really work really hard at making that happen. So that will do it for us for this evening on the Bronx Buzz, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, and good night.